BMX bikes of the 1980s didn't just fill driveways, they defined a generation. This was the decade when a two-wheeled machine could tell the entire neighborhood exactly who you were. From the chrome Mongoose Californian pressed against every shop window, to the Haro Freestyler that launched a whole new discipline, to the GT Performer that lit up the big screen, each bike carried a story, a status, and a price that parents still remember. This countdown reveals which frames actually shaped the era, and why the ones that mattered then are worth a fortune now. So which bike reigns supreme? Stick around for the number 1. Subscribe so you don't miss the reveal. Let's start with number 10. Number 10. 1984. Hutch BMX, out of California, dropped the Trickstar into a market that had barely figured out what freestyle even meant. The problem was straightforward. Racing frames broke under street abuse. Riders pulling flatland tricks and launch ramp stunts needed something that wouldn't crack at the chainstays after 2 weeks of hard use. Hutch answered with a heat-treated chrome moly main triangle, butted tubing down to 1.4 millimeters at the midsection with reinforced 2.1 millimeters gussets at the head tube junction. The bottom bracket sat 11.5 inches off the ground, a low center of gravity that made balance tricks far more forgiving. Complete bike weight came in at 26.4 pounds, a full 4 pounds under most comparable steel builds of that year. In the freestyle contest circuit of 1984 and 1985, the Trickstar appeared on podiums across California. BMX Action magazine ran a 2-page spread in their November 1984 issue, calling it one of the most technically considered freestyle frames available to the mass market, all at a price of $279. For the kids who wrote it, the Trickstar was permission to go beyond the race oval and treat any curb as a launch ramp. Hutch gave freestyle riders their first purpose-built machine at a price within reach. That engineering commitment forced brands watching from the sidelines to invest resources they had been withholding, setting the stage for a wave of purpose-built freestyle machines that would reshape the entire market. Number 9. 1979. SE Racing, founded by Scott Breithaupt in San Bernardino, California, built the PK Ripper as a direct response to a problem that was costing riders races at the start gate. The issue was front-end dive under hard acceleration. Standard BMX geometry of the late 70s used a 71-degree head tube angle that caused the front wheel to push wide out of the first berm, losing critical fractions of a second. SE's answer was a steepened 75-degree head tube angle combined with a shortened 14.5-inch chainstay, bringing the rear wheel 17 millimeters closer to the bottom bracket than the industry standard. The main frame was hand-welded 4130 chrome moly at 22 pounds complete. Fork offset was cut to 28 millimeters, making steering response almost aggressive on first contact. Proof arrived immediately. PK Ripper riders took multiple ABA and NBL national titles in 1980 and 1981. Bicycle Motocross Action named it the race bike to beat in their 1981 buyer's guide, and the frame outsold SE's own projections by over 30% in the first production year. Among racers, a PK Ripper was a declaration of intent. The geometry wasn't built for comfort. It was built for controlled aggression at race pace. SE's willingness to deviate so sharply from accepted angles forced Redline, Diamondback, and Mongoose to reconsider whether the geometry they had been copying from decade-old designs was actually fast or just familiar. Number 8. 1984. Gary Turner's GT bicycles introduced the Performer at a moment when freestyle was transitioning from a race day sideshow into its own legitimate discipline. The problem GT was solving was visibility. Freestyle was heading toward television, mall demos, and Hollywood, and GT understood that a bike appearing on screen needed to look like it belonged to the future. The Performer used GT's signature triple triangle design, a secondary structural triangle from the seat tube junction to the rear dropout, adding torsional rigidity without adding weight. Frame material was 4130 chrome moly at 4.8 pounds bare. Complete build weight 25 pounds with GT mag wheels. Geometry ran a 75-degree head tube angle and 15.5-inch chainstays, tuned for the slow-speed pivot demands of flatland and ramp riding. The Performer was the machine for the GT Freestyle team throughout 1985 and 1986 and appeared in the 1986 film RAD, a moment that put the bike in front of millions of viewers who had never seen a BMX track, driving unprecedented showroom traffic nationwide. For anyone who grew up watching Raid, the Performer was the bike on the poster, the one you pointed at and told your parents was the only one worth having. The Performer's screen presence forced every competing brand to treat Freestyle as a marketing platform, pushing the industry toward the media-savvy era that defined the decade's back half. Quick one, subscribe if this kind of history is your thing. What's coming up next might be the most important BMX brand name of the entire decade. Number 7. 1975. Refined through the early 80s. Redline bicycles, launched by Lynn Castan and Mike Freeton in Van Nuys, California, built the 700A. When BMX racing was still writing its own rulebook. The problem Redline was addressing was consistency. Early BMX was chaotic. No standardized track design, no unified rule set, and bikes adapted from other disciplines rather than purpose-built. Redline wanted a race-specific machine that performed identically lap after lap, regardless of track. The 700A used a full 4130 chrome moly frame set with Redline's signature square profile taper on the top tube, increasing vertical stiffness without adding cross-sectional weight. Frame weight hit 4.2 pounds. Geometry ran a 72.5-degree head tube angle and 16.25-inch chainstays, balancing acceleration with berm tracking stability. Redline also developed the flight cranks, a one-piece unit that eliminated the axle failures plaguing BMX racing since its earliest days. Results confirmed the approach. Redline riders accumulated over 60 national championship titles across ABA and NBL competition during the late 70s and early 80s. The flight cranks became industry standard equipment, referenced in crank specifications across nearly every major brand that followed. The 700A became the bike that serious racing families invested in. Coaches who specified it for their best riders, dads who understood the geometry. Owning one wasn't a fashion statement. It was a technical decision. The standard set by the 700A and its flight cranks forced every serious BMX brand to rethink their drivetrain engineering, starting a component arms race that defined the mid-decade market. Number 6. 1982. Bob Haro, himself a legendary freestyle rider, launched the Haro Bicycle Company and introduced the Freestyler as the first production bike built around the demands of the discipline he had helped invent. The problem was an expertise gap. Every freestyle bike available in 1982 was a race bike with a different paint job. No manufacturer had asked what a freestyle-specific frame actually needed to do. Bob Haro had, because he had been doing freestyle professionally since 1978. His answer was geometry built around the rider, not borrowed from the race circuit. The Freestyler ran a 74-degree head tube angle and 16.5-inch chainstays to slow steering and extend the wheelbase for slow-speed flatland stability. Frame was 4130 chrome moly, with additional gusseting at the head tube and seat tube junctions, stress points that race frames routinely failed under the lateral forces of trick riding. Complete weight, 28 pounds, deliberately heavier to provide the inertia flatland tricks require. The Freestyler debuted on the professional demo circuit in 1982 and 1983, piloted by Haro himself and his growing team. BMX Plus magazine called it the first bike that treated freestyle as a discipline in its own right, rather than a race category footnote. For riders inventing tricks in car parks and playgrounds, the Freestyler was validation, serious enough to deserve its own machine. Bob Haro's blank sheet approach pushed Hutch, Mongoose, and every major brand to develop dedicated freestyle lines, triggering the specialty bike explosion that carried the industry through the rest of the decade. Number 5. 1974 evolved throughout the entire decade. Skip Hess and BMX Sturzatox products launched the Mongoose with one goal: build the lightest, strongest production BMX frame that any kid could actually buy. The problem was weight at accessible price. Hand-built custom frames had been shaving pounds off race setups for years, but those bikes cost more than most families' car payments. BMX products wanted that technology on the shop floor. The answer was a triple-butted chrome moly frame set with a proprietary gusset design at the head tube, a reinforcement plate that allowed tube walls to be thinned elsewhere without sacrificing integrity at the highest stress joint. The Californian ran a 72-degree head tube angle and 16-inch chainstays. Frame weight hit 3.8 pounds, extraordinary for a production bike of that era. The Mongoose motocross stem, a forged aluminum unit, shaved 180 additional grams over the steel stems every competitor used. National results tracked directly with the bike's adoption. Mongoose-sponsored riders won ABA Grands titles in 1977 and 1978, and the brand maintained top-tier national representation through 1985. Mongoose was the first BMX brand to achieve genuine mainstream retail distribution, appearing in Sears catalogs from the late 70s onward. The Californian was the aspirational bike, the one in the shop window that set the ceiling. If money was no object, this was the answer. The Mongoose's mainstream retail breakthrough forced a reckoning across the industry. High-performance BMX was now a mass-market category, and every brand had to find a way to compete in shops that sold lawnmowers. Number 4. 1982 Diamondback, launched by Dan Hennebrink under Western States Imports, introduced the Viper as a direct answer to what BMX should look like as the decade turned technical. The problem was the range gap. By 1982, BMX had split into pure race bikes and nascent freestyle machines, leaving a huge middle market of riders who raced on weekends and rode streets the rest of the week. No brand was building one machine that could credibly do both. Diamondback's response was a multi-use geometry, a 73.5-degree head tube angle, splitting the difference between race aggression and freestyle stability, with 15.75-inch chainstays, providing reasonable acceleration without racetrack demands at low speed. Frame was double-butted 4130 chrome moly at 4.4 pounds, complete build 24.8 pounds. The Viper shipped with a removable gyro detangler mount, forward-thinking in 1982, when gyros were still custom aftermarket, enabling handlebar rotation without tangled cables. Diamondback team riders appeared consistently in BMX Plus and Freestyling throughout 1983 and 1984, running Vipers across both disciplines. The bike moved an estimated 40,000 units in its first 2 production years. For the kid who raced Thursday evenings and spent Saturday mornings learning a nose manual in the car park, the Viper was the answer. You didn't have to choose. Diamondback's dual-purpose success proved there was a mass market between race purists and freestyle specialists, a discovery that reshaped product planning at every competing brand entering 1984. Number 3. Late 70s through 1985. Schwinn, the Chicago institution that had defined American bicycle culture for decades, watched BMX arrive with initial skepticism, then entered with the full weight of the country's most recognized bike brand. The problem Schwinn solved was different from every other entry on this list. The The other brand solved engineering problems. Schwinn solved a reach problem. How do you put a BMX bike in the hands of kids whose parents had never heard of SE Racing or Redline? The answer was distribution and trust. The Scrambler used high-tensile steel, not chrome moly. Not butted, nothing technically ambitious, 30 pounds complete, a 72-degree head tube angle, and 16.5-inch chainstays. What it had was Schwinn's nationwide dealer network of over 2,000 retail locations and a retail price of $149, putting it within reach of families who would never spend $279 on a Hutch. Schwinn moved over 500,000 Scrambler units between 1979 and 1985, a volume no other BMX brand came close to. Not the race circuit's pick or the freestyle team's choice. The choice of millions of ordinary kids whose parents asked the shop assistant which BMX was the safe one. For a vast portion of the 80s generation, the Scrambler was simply the first bike. The one that taught you to balance, the one that got stolen and replaced in a different color. Schwinn's sheer volume redefined what the BMX market was, not a niche, but a mass phenomenon that brought corporate money, media attention, and eventually Hollywood into the sport. Number 2. 1987. By the mid-decade mark, freestyle had overtaken racing as the cultural face of BMX, and Haro introduced the Master as the definitive professional freestyle machine of the late 80s. The problem by 1987 was obsolescence. Frames that had launched freestyle in 1982 were being ridden at a level their designers had never anticipated. Professionals were pulling double decades, triple bar spins, and aerial combinations that the first generation of freestyle frames simply weren't built to survive. The Master addressed this with a complete rethink. Frame tubing was air-hardened chrome moly with a 3-stage butting profile, 2.2 mm at both ends, 1.6 mm midsection, delivering a bare frame weight of 3.9 pounds while maintaining an impact resistance previous frames couldn't match. Geometry ran a 75.5-degree head tube angle and 14.75-inch chainstays. Haro's shortest, purpose-built for the rapid direction changes of competition flatland. It was also the first Haro production model to ship with a fully integrated gyro detangler as standard. At the 1987 and 1988 AFA Masters competitions, Haro team riders placed in the top 3 across multiple professional divisions. The bike appeared on the covers of a BMX Plus and Freestyler within its first production year, an unprecedented double placement for a single model. For riders watching AFA contests on VHS tapes swapped at school, the Master was the summit, the bike that the world's best riders used when winning actually mattered. The Master's technical specification effectively closed the door on first-generation freestyle geometry, forcing every brand still selling 1983-era frames to engineer a genuine successor or concede the professional market entirely. Number 1. 1979. While every other brand was shrinking frames in pursuit of lighter race geometry, BMX products built bigger and created the most recognizable BMX silhouette of the entire decade. The problem was a perception problem. BMX had a size ceiling, small bikes for small kids. Older riders who had outgrown 20-inch bikes had nowhere to go. They were expected to move to road bikes and leave the culture behind. Mongoose refused. The Super Goose ran a 24-inch wheel platform larger than any BMX on the market, with a chrome moly frame set scaled to maintain race geometry proportionality rather than simply stretching existing tubes. Head tube angle, 74 degrees. Chainstays, 17.5 inches. Frame weight, 5.2 pounds. Shipping with a forged alloy stem and wide riser bar that gave the bike a visual presence no 20-inch machine could match. The Super Goose appeared on the cover of BMX Plus in June 1980 and became the defining bike for the older rider, the teenager who wanted to stay in the culture, the race, and the conversation. It held a consistent top 5 position in premium BMX sales nationally from 1980 to 1984, with used examples trading at 2 to 3 times retail on the secondary market. For the older kid on the block, the one who had saved up, who set trends rather than followed them, the Super Goose was a final statement. Size, quality, and attitude made it the most culturally loaded frame of the decade. No single bike did more to prove BMX wasn't just for children, paving the way for an adult market that sustained the industry long after the 80s boom had cooled. From the Hutch Trickstar's first serious attempt at a purpose-built freestyle frame, to the P.K. Ripper's race geometry revolution, through the GT Performer's Hollywood moment, Redline's drivetrain engineering breakthrough, Haro's twin contributions to the discipline it helped create, the Mongoose Californian's race performance at mass market scale, Diamondback's dual-purpose answer for the rider who wouldn't choose, Schwinn's distribution triumph that brought BMX into 500,000 homes, the Haro Master's professional-grade technical leap, and all the way to the Super Goose, the bike that refused to let BMX stay small. This countdown has traced 10 different answers to the same question: what should a BMX bike actually be? And the honest answer is that every one of them was right. Just about something different. About speed, or freedom, or status, or reach. About who BMX was for, and how far it could go. Each brand solved a different problem for a different rider. And together, they built something bigger than any one frame, any one material choice, or any one race result. They built a culture with price tags that parents winced at, with geometry that coaches debated, with magazine spreads that kids cut out and taped to bedroom walls, a culture that crossed from the race oval to the supermarket car park to the movie screen, and somehow held all of that together without breaking. The answer, it turns out, was never one thing. BMX in the 80s was a decade-long argument between speed and style, between racing and freedom, between what the sport had been and what it was relentlessly becoming. The bikes on this list weren't just machines, they were positions in that argument. And the reason we still talk about them, still restore them, still pay $5,000 for a clean original at auction, is that each one was right about something. They captured a moment when 2 wheels and a set of handlebars were enough to tell the world exactly who you were. That's not something you forget. That's not something that ends when the decade does. Because the kid who saved up for a Super Goose, the one who memorized the head tube angle on a PK Ripper, the one who pressed their nose against the glass at the GT Performer, that kid is still out there. Some of them are restoring the bikes they lost. Some of them just found one in a loft. All of them remember. In the end, the 1980s BMX boom wasn't just about bikes. It was about freedom, identity, and the relentless drive to reinvent what was possible on 2 wheels. If you want more countdowns like this one, subscribe. The next one might rank the bike you actually owned. Which frame on this list was your dream ride? Let us know in the comments below.